This week on Entrepreneurs, we chat to creative entrepreneurs who have chalked up business success doing the work they love. I'm Jack Delosa, and Entrepreneurs starts now.
This is Entrepreneurs.
Welcome to Entrepreneurs. Tonight we go into the creative space, learning to balance creativity and commerce. Joining me on tonight's show are Tim Burrows, founder of the great brand Mumbrella, a place where media and marketing come together, arts entrepreneur Danielle O'Keefe of The House That Dan Built, and Katie Perot, founder of The Illustration Room, a website that delivers original artists' illustrations and animations. We'll start with Tim, who, as I said, created a successful digital publication and now a significant event brand. They publish titles across the media, marketing, advertising and publishing sector, running national events and awards. Tim, thank you so much for joining us on Entrepreneurs.
Jack, lovely to be with you.
I'm a huge fan of Mumbrella. Well done on everything you achieved. Yeah, well done. Now, Tim, you were way ahead of your time jumping into entrepreneurial ventures in publishing as a journalist. What made you take the leap?
Look, probably two things. The main thing being we were just very fortunate with the timing, because arguably what Mumbrella does, which is, you know, it has a digital presence and it has a real world presence through events, but it's old-fashioned B2B publishing. The one difference being 15 years ago, if you were a journalist and wanted to start your own business, you'd probably have to mortgage the house to publish the first edition of the magazine, because you'd need to print a ton of copies. Whereas, of course, when digital came through, that all changed. So all of a sudden you could jump on something like WordPress and publish very cheaply. You know, email systems that maybe even cost $20,000 2 years before were suddenly 20 or 30 bucks a month to start off with. Plus things like Twitter were coming through. So some of it was timing. And then the other thing was my co-founder, Martin Lane, who we'd worked together previously, had been working at another publishing company, had an idea to do something together, so there was a spare desk to come along and for me to be the first employee, working in someone else's business from the side of a desk, getting things going in a very low-cost way.
That is an amazing beginning. Mumbrella, where does the name come from?
Well, look, like many ideas, I suspect, it was kind of cooked up in the pub. So I was chatting,
like all the best ideas.
Like all the best ideas,
yes.
I hope. So I was chatting to a friend who worked in a media agency, and I kept sort of talking about what it was about, which was this idea: it's everything under the media and marketing umbrella. So we ended up sort of shortening the M's of media and marketing and umbrella. And then you could tell he was a sort of advertising type, because he's like, mum is a very warm word semantically. So that was what we went with. And of course, one of the benefits we really found was actually when it comes to trademarking, when it comes to distinctiveness with domains, all of those things, having a unique word actually is something incredibly useful.
Right. That is an incredible story. Tim, one of the things I love about your story is you've been quite vocal and transparent about the challenges you've faced, both as an entrepreneur, financially. Can you give us a few of what your biggest lessons have been? Yeah,
look, I think where we really began to hit our stride was when we began to work out what process we could repeat. So, we sort of, there was a point where we began to get to the point where more than half of what we did was the event side of things, so putting on conferences, putting on awards, that side of things, rather than just the publishing side, which is still important to us because that's one of the things that builds the brand. But the thing that we sort of began to sort of make progress and crack it was when we realised that a lot of those processes could be made repeatable. So if internally it's a different event and a different segment or whatever, but you know how you're going to run at it, you know how many weeks it's going to take to do, what resource you need to put in, probably what the outcome will be. So that's one of the things that helped us get to scale, I think.
Great. What were some of the key challenges you faced along the way? There must have been a few.
Yeah, look, I think like any entrepreneur, it's scaling and managing cash flow as well is always a challenge because, of course, there are times of the year where more's going out than coming in and vice versa, so you need to always be planning for that. But I think the thing for us as well was we always had in mind that we had quite a long-term picture of where we go, and that was about building the brand, not taking too many shortcuts. So I talked about sort of Martin as my co-founder. It was almost, I was all about okay, you know, let's try and build this big thing. And Martin was the one who actually ran the business. Right. So, you know, it was almost I was responsible for the product, Martin responsible for the actual running of the business, and then sort of this sort of creative tension between making sure you hit the next quarter's numbers, the next year's numbers, but then actually making sure that you're always building so that you've got something that's going to be of scale and value at the other end of it.
Yeah. One of the things Mumbrella's always done really well is the community commentary. Which it sometimes is controversial. Talk to us about what you learned from that element of your offering.
Yeah, look, it was really interesting, particularly in the early days, because, you know, as I mentioned earlier, it was just as Twitter began to come through. Right. And the sort of people who'd be on Twitter in those early days were exactly the sort of people that we would want driving a conversation. So often I'd, you know, tweet something, they would pile into the comment thread, and then by the time that email of initially the week, but then the day went out, there was already a conversation going, and and the conversation tends to go where the conversation is. And again, we were quite fortunate that we had sort of established, you know, print rivals who did have digital products, but there was no conversation going on there. So the challenge for us over the years has always been managing that balance between, you know, constructive commentary and negative commentary. And we've not always got it right, I'm sure, because, of course, what you want is a really kind of interesting conversation that always adds something to it. But that's, I suspect, the challenge with any form of digital publishing. Yeah,
it is an interesting balance that you're mentioning. The media world continues to be in a very challenging place. What advice do you give to, you know, the Tim Burrows 10 years ago, so to speak, who are looking to go into it now, and the journalists who are looking to achieve longevity?
Look, I'm not sure I'm that well placed to advise every journalist, because one of the things we're very fortunate to have is a niche where there's a very valuable audience, you know. So, you know, the sort of people who read Mumbrella work in big marketing roles, in big media spending roles for media agencies, so they're an audience that advertisers and sponsors want to speak to. So I think one of the things as a journalist is if you think it's advertising driven, it needs to be a niche where people want to speak to your audience, and if not, then you need to be thinking about how you get your audience to pay for what you produce.
What's next for a Mumbrella, and how does that kind of align or converge with some of the future trends you see playing out in digital publishing?
Look, and it goes back to my previous point actually, one of the focuses for us this year will absolutely be about creating new products and building on existing products where we can drive subscription revenue as well. So in other words, asking our audience to pay for new information, new research, all of those things. So that will be our big project this year. We've already put some CapEx aside for it, so we'll be investing in doing that with both people and building something. I don't think you can ask people to pay for something they've had for free, so it's creating new things which bring more value. So that will be our big project this year.
Right. Tim, tonight's topic is creative entrepreneurs. How have you balanced that tension between being a creative and someone who's highly creative and being a businessman? And do you think there can be a synergy to be found there where those two can actually work harmoniously together?
Look, there's always a creative tension with it. You know, I've alluded to the fact that I had a co-founder, and that actually made a big difference, because there were times where I was able to just focus on the product and get on with it while the business was, I could be confident the business was being run. Yes. So that was a really important factor. But I think for anyone who's thinking about it, it's, you know, don't just do it for the sake of it. Do it because you've got a bit of a picture on what the thing is you want to do, what the product is, what the problem you're solving, all of those things. I think that starting point of I want to run a business is probably not the right starting point.
Yeah. What are some of the best examples of creative leadership that you've seen?
Look, I think within our industry, and it's topical with the announcement of Ita Buttrose as the chairman of the ABC today. I think Mark Scott is much missed as the managing director of the ABC. Yep. He was a wonderful creative leader, I think. You know, a huge organisation. He came out, he championed it, he understood the journalism side of it and the challenging, but played the politics behind the scenes very well as well. You know, he was a real leader of a creative organisation which, you know, never took everybody with him, because nobody does, but took most people with him. So he would be a wonderful example of that.
Tim Burrows, co-founder of Mumbrella, thank you so much for joining us on Entrepreneurs. It's a fascinating story.
My pleasure.
We appreciate it. When we come back, we talk to Katie Perot about her digital marketplace for artists and illustrators, The Illustration Room.
You're watching Entrepreneurs.
Welcome back to Entrepreneurs. We are talking to Katie Perot, founder of the Illustration Room, a website for visual artists and potential clients to connect. Katie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jack.
Illustration Room is a very cool concept. What gave you the idea to start it?
I was working in magazine publishing at the time, and I have also got an economics degree, so I had always wanted to do something business-wise, and I thought I'd try to combine the both of them and come up with something that worked back with the client base that I already had.
Are you an illustrator yourself?
No, I'm not.
Wow.
I'm an art director.
Right. And so who uses your services? What sort of artists do you represent?
So I represent a range of artists, and I doing all kinds of different mediums, from screen printing to vector art to animation to watercolours, and then clients such as advertising agencies, magazine publishers, book publishers, marketing executives will contact us to execute a project for them.
Yes, yes. And today there are obviously many online marketplaces for graphic designers, but you guys are different. Talk to us about how and why.
So we supply only the illustration side of things. So graphic designers would contact us and we would be part of their project, whether that be the illustration component of perhaps a wine label that a graphic design agency is producing, or an advertising agency would be producing a campaign for a global bank and they needed illustrations to go within that. We would do the illustration component.
Now, creatives, we often hear them spoken about as the wonderful problem children of the business world. What are some of the common challenges that you see creatives face when it comes to marketing their work and managing their clients and the business side of things?
It's very difficult for them to do both, to do the business side as well as the creative side. So I do the business side for them and make sure that the projects run smoothly, the brief is very clear, the expectations are very clear, and then the illustrators draw and concentrate on that.
Are you of the view that creatives should be left alone to create, and that's where they produce their best work?
Commercial illustration is quite different because it's a collaboration between the illustrator and the client, and so you have to take another person's idea and execute that within your style. So it's not like fine art where you're drawing something from you. So you're trying to send a message and communicate a message for a brand or for a client in a specific way. Yeah.
Talk to us about your entrepreneurial journey. What have been your milestones of growth along the life cycle of this particular business?
For me, it's just been very exciting to start something that was initially just for me to service the industry that I worked in magazine publishing, and now I have a business where we work globally with illustrators and clients all over the world. And today we opened our first exhibition. We were invited by the Royal Botanic Gardens in Sydney to do an exhibition there in the Calyx on carnivorous plants, and we've done retro comic book covers that are and movie covers, which are fantastic in the Calyx in the Royal Botanic Garden. So it's been all the exciting adventures that I've had along the way with clients and the relationships I've formed with clients, but also the artists. It's been a really beautiful community that I've been able to create for illustrators.
It sounds like a really fun job.
It's very fun. I have a lot of fun.
We could swap. Yeah. All right, are you looking for an intern?
Yeah, okay. Come over, Jack.
What do you love most about your role these days? Being an entrepreneur, running this business, working with creatives, what do you most enjoy about it?
I enjoy both the business side and the creative side, so I get a huge buzz when something starts as a Word document in a conversation with a client, and then I match them with the right artist to execute the project, and then next thing you see that on a billboard in Hong Kong, or on a bottle of wine in a restaurant, or in a National Gallery in a bookshop, and it's an immense buzz to see something that you've created physically and tangibly somewhere. Yeah, it's a super buzz for me.
That is fascinating. I mean, I often talk about business in that context. You know, you have an idea or you have an inspired, feeling in your heart, and from that comes this something very real that actually exists in the real world that people can interact with and touch. I think that's an incredibly enjoyable component of the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And to have created something that wasn't there before, that's what's been an immense pleasure for me. The Illustration Room didn't exist before I had the idea and before I created it. And so that's a drive for me, and to create an income for lots of people.
Absolutely. So that's what you love most about it. What do you find the most challenging about your role?
The challenges have been the change in the environment since I started the illustration room. It was very print heavy initially when I started. I still do a lot of print. I'm doing more books than I've ever done, which I love because everyone always used to say print will die, but I'm doing more books than ever.
Why is that? That's interesting.
Why are there more books than ever?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that, but I love a book. I never stopped buying books.
Yeah.
I never bought a Kindle. It wasn't. I think there's something about the connection to the paper, and perhaps everybody's over mobile phoning and wants to have a book. I don't know exactly the answer to that, but our the print side of our business has not dropped off.
That's actually amazing and good to hear. Katie Perot, thank you so much for joining us on Entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Jack.
We appreciate it. Time for another break. When we come back, we'll be talking about the house that Dan built and the toy choir with Danielle O'Keefe.
You're watching Entrepreneurs.
Welcome back to Entrepreneurs. We are joined by Danielle O'Keefe. We can't do justice to Danielle's artistic resume on this show, so we're going to focus in on her business credentials. Danielle is the founder of the Toy Choir and the house that Dan built. I love that name. Both ventures are focused on youth performances. Danielle, thank you so much for being here.
Hello.
Now, your background is amazing. It looks like you've never spent a day of your life in a normal office. You've really lived your passion as an artist. Tell us about that journey and where you found the confidence to blaze this trail.
Yeah, well, I really have had a very colourful, unique and joyous career to date. I think I knew always that I was going to be someone who needed to learn experientially. And so that's how it started for me. I finished high school and I knew it was time to go out and really explore and start the adventure. And yeah, 14 days after I finished year 12, I had a contract and a ticket to the US, and I was on my way in my sports girl little outfit that was made out of cotton, ready to arrive in Denver, Colorado in the middle of winter. So yeah, it was definitely that sort of way of starting that began the adventure. So for that year, I had an entire year of being able to learn on the job, of being in a show every day and getting to, really test my chops as a performer. And they gave a really great opportunity that we could do internships and see what it was like to create and run a performing arts company that toured right around the US. And so from there, I was able to see the great holes that I had in my knowledge, which were vast, and then be able to hone where I wanted to learn and what I needed to learn to have a future as, at the time, I thought I was going to be a performer, and then I realised that actually, no, I was a conductor and an artist and a creator. And so then I started down on that path. And I had great opportunities being a conductor of the Australian Children's Choir and creating my own works. And then, fast forward a couple of years, I took over as artistic director of Outback Theatre, and that's where I think the inception of starting the house that Dan built really started to build. And yeah, I mean, the house that Dan built, I came up with the name because I wanted someone to give me a house. And that was the goal. I sort of thought, there's no way I can start a company in the arts in the current climate that we have. I need someone to give me a house. And that took me about 9 months till that happened. And yeah, the rest is history.
I absolutely love this. So your adventure started 14 days after high school, and it sounds like it hasn't stopped since.
That's probably true.
What led you to make the shift from director and performer to business builder?
Yeah, I think that was reactionary. So I wasn't able to create the type of work I wanted to create in the time frame that I wanted to do it. So I could see there was an avenue, there was a way of being able to start something new, and I was the person best suited to do it.
You're a few years down the path now. What have you learned about building, from both of your businesses?
I'd say the biggest lesson I've learned is that you need to be specific. If you know what it is you want, and you know how to, and you even have an idea of how to get there. If you're specific in that pursuit, you'll get it. You might not get it quickly, but you will get it.
Financially, any early stage, high growth business is a challenge.
Yeah.
What have you found in terms of the strategies for building a financially sustainable business?
This is actually, so when I first started, prior to the 2 years leading up to, beginning, I went and immersed myself in different organisations to see what they were doing and how they were doing it. And by being immersed in and witnessing different industries, not necessarily the arts, I was able to see which companies were simply surviving and which were really thriving. And so by looking at different industries, I was able to see how important it was for us to really diversify our income streams. So that's where we're at right now, is we can see that we need to really diversify to keep ourselves sustainable moving forward.
And how do you balance the needs of your business with your own desire to be creative and a performer? You know, which wolf do you feed the most?
Yeah. Well, I don't think of myself with the two hats anymore. I used to a lot. The difference between being a conductor and working in performance is completely different. I felt like I very much had two hats on. But in terms of running an organisation, I am constantly using both sides of my brain, and when they're both firing at their best capacity, which is when they're 50-50, is when I'm really in my power place.
That is a really interesting insight.
So for me, it's very much about making sure that the two are constantly working together and firing. And
I would imagine the creative side of you and the performing side of you helps fuel that and helps enable that.
That's right. And it's really, there's certain things I don't compromise on. I sing every day. Like that's a given. I make sure that that's always happening. But other aspects of my life, like I'm definitely not the poster girl for work-life balance at the moment, but what I am able to find is that if I'm working in that power place of really, you know, using both sides of my brain and letting my creativity and my business really flourish, then things are much more graceful.
I love that you called it the house that Dan built because you wanted somebody to give you a house.
Yeah, but that's where if you're specific. I knew exactly what I needed to create a sustainable business. I mean, the arts industry had just been completely shaken up in terms of how we were funded. And so I knew to actually begin, I was going to need to give myself a strong foundation and get, you know, really lower those overheads to begin.
Super cool. Yeah, super cool. What's next for the house that Dan built?
Well, we've definitely got a few things on the horizon in terms of our creativity. We have a show that's about to open at Bondi Pavilion, and it's all things salt and female voices.
Talk to us about that because I'm interested.
Yeah, so it's an immersive way of experiencing female voices. So as a conductor, I know I have the best seat in the house. And how do I give that to an audience is what I've been exploring. Yep. So this is 14 voices. And the audience is roving and moving in between. It's sculptural, it's visual, and that's SALT. Then in terms of actually the organisation, we have our very first fundraiser that we're going to attempt to open the doors to a different audience, try and find some partnerships that can really see the ecosystem that we've created and be able to join our gang to help us really achieve our next goals of growing.
Yes. And
by growing, I do mean that it's time for us to not necessarily get bigger, but better at what we're doing. And for that, I think we need to find a partnership.
Yes, yes. Danielle, you are an absolute powerhouse. What advice do you give to people looking to build a business, you know, as an arts organisation?
I think if you know what it is that you want to do and why you want to do it, and you can see that you are the best person to do it, and then you're able to tell the people around you and get them on board so that they can see your vision and be able to support you, you've got the bit of the dream team. That is, yes. And really, it's like if I can do it, you can do it. Because, it's just about giving it a go.
What an incredible story. You're an incredible person. Danielle O'Keefe, thank you so much for joining us on Entrepreneurs.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's it for Entrepreneurs tonight. Next week, diversity takes centre stage when we focus on migrant entrepreneurs. You can watch us anytime on Foxtel Go and on the catch-up section of yourmoney.com.au. I'm Jack Delosa. Good night.